Good evening on this lovely Tuesday. My name is Medri Nyambura. We are talking about AQ today, and today is Tuesday do's and don'ts. Why are my words? Okay, today is Tuesday do's and don'ts, and today we are talking about EQ. So I'll give you a very short story. Today at the office, I stand in the kitchen and ask people, what is EQ? I will not go ahead and embarrass my own family because half the people did not know what that was, and that's why we have an expert today to talk to us about it. You've met her before. Her name is Muchaneta Mlingo. If you're wondering how I know her name so perfectly, it's because one, I'm obsessed with her name, and secondly, she has the best energy ever. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me
You
back.
look so nice.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I really loved our previous session. I think you taught people a lot, and I remember we had a conversation after that, and we said we need to talk about EQ.
Yes.
Here we are.
Awesome.
What's EQ?
So emotional intelligence is simply being smart with feelings.
Okay.
The reality is that we are both people who have feelings and people who process thoughts. And EQ is about utilizing both, utilizing both the emotions and thought to make rational decisions. So that's like a simple explanation of it. So it's the ability to be aware of, to control, manage, to express your emotions as you interact on a daily basis.
Okay. So people will ask the question, there's IQ and EQ. What's the difference?
I think IQ speaks to your academic ability.
Okay.
So, how smart you are as far as, books are concerned. So we laud high IQ in our school system and we celebrate it a lot.
That's
EQ
true.
speaks now to the emotional side. So being able to balance both emotion and thought. If you think about it, one of the things I always say is that we really celebrate IQ, we celebrate academic excellence. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're not important.
Yes.
I have 2 boys and I fully expect them to do well in school.
Yes.
But the reality is that individuals who are high in EQ, emotional intelligence, actually are more successful. If you think about it, you will undoubtedly know an individual who was very smart in school, but makes very poor choices
In life?
in life.
Yes.
And the converse is true. An individual who in school, people thought, hey, this one will amount to nothing, and yet makes good choices.
Lifts hand.
Hey.
Yes.
So
Okay.
academics are important. Academics open doors. The kids who get an A in school probably get a scholarship to go to university. So I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying the importance of IQ and academics. But the reality is academics open the door, maybe get you the job. EQ is what gives you the staying power.
I get you. Oh, that explains why sometimes people may not perform exemplary in school, but then you get to hear maybe 30 years later they run this big empire.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll get to that on how we can get there ourselves.
Sure.
But many will ask, why is EQ important? Because if I know my stuff by going to school, why do I need to know my own self in terms of emotionally?
I think the reality is that success is derived from the way we interact with people.
Okay.
More often than not, for us to be successful, that requires us to be able to interact with people. And emotional intelligence is at the heart of relationships because it's about being able to be aware of your feelings, aware of how your feelings impact others, your emotions impact others. It's also about being aware of other people's emotions and the fact, that, how they're reacting to the day and the like. So it's important. It's very important because at the end of the day, success requires us to have good relationships with the people around us. No man is an island, as we all know.
Yeah.
So you find that people who are successful, if you look at leadership, for example, leaders achieve what they achieve through people.
That's true.
Good CEOs aren't caught up in the operations. They're caught up in the strategy. The operations are done by the people who work with them. Hence why research shows that CEOs who are high in emotional intelligence are more successful. And, we've thought of emotional intelligence as a soft skill. But again, research shows that it has hard results. CEOs who are high in emotional intelligence actually generate better business results.
Okay.
So there is a business case for emotional intelligence as well.
Okay, you've already touched on it, what EQ looks like at work. So maybe we'll start with the employee, say someone like me. What does EQ look like if I have a high EQ?
All right, so I'm an emotional intelligence practitioner with an organization called 6 Seconds.
Okay.
6 Seconds is a global network that really is all about helping people to develop greater emotional intelligence. So what 6 Seconds did is based on initial research done by Daniel Goleman, who is the individual that really brought emotional intelligence to the fore. Most people, when they think EQ, think of Daniel Goleman. They looked at the model he developed and decided to, develop a simple model that one can use to be able to practice emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And that model has 3 parts. And the reason why I mention this is because this feeds into the question you asked. So it has 3 parts. Number one, know yourself. So knowing yourself is about truly understanding your emotional state, how you tend to react to things, what are your triggers, right? Yes. The second part of the model is choose yourself. Choose yourself is about being intentional. It's about understanding that emotions are data. It is data that I must intentionally pick up on, hence the know yourself, but it doesn't necessarily mean I must obey it.
Okay.
I must know it, but not necessarily obey it. So choosing yourself is about being intentional. Choosing yourself is about responding rather than reacting.
Okay.
And then the third part of it is give yourself. Give yourself is about having a reason why. Because if I have a reason why, it becomes easier to know myself and to choose myself, right?
Yes.
So when we're talking about the work setting, what does EQ look like in the workplace? Individuals who are high in emotional intelligence live beyond the moment. Right? They live beyond the moment. So it's not just about this interaction we're having. If I know myself, firstly, I know the things that tend to trigger. If I'm oblivious to the way that I react, if I'm oblivious to my emotions, I'm more likely to get caught up in situations and they just catch me unawares. When I know myself, I know what are my boundaries? What are my limitations? Do I need to take a walk after lunch?
Just to
decompress because the stresses of the morning will impact the way I interact with my colleagues in the afternoon. So when you are high in emotional intelligence in the workplace, it begins to enable you to be more effective because you understand who you are, how you react, and you also start to pick up on the emotions of others. Then because you know yourself, you're better able to choose yourself.
Okay.
So I'll give you a really simple and silly example.
Yes.
I hate traffic, like with a vengeance.
Wrong city, perhaps?
I'm telling you. I've lived in Kenya now for 10 years.
Yes.
And I still have not acclimatized. I hate traffic, like with a passion.
Yes.
So traffic is my trigger. And I know this. But because I know myself, because I know that when I'm stuck in traffic, my temperature starts rising, the matatu driver cuts in front of me and I just feel like, right?
Yeah.
It's my trigger. So because I know myself, I can choose myself. I can put in place strategies that help me to circumvent my issues with traffic, right?
Yes.
So for example, my children go to school within a 5-kilometer radius to where we live. My office, same thing. I don't drive into town, ever. Right? I'd rather even walk if it was that desperate.
Yes.
And it's all because I know myself. So I give that as a simple example to illustrate my point that when you know yourself, you're able to choose yourself. If I know that there's a particular individual in the office who when I just see them, I start feeling hot.
Yes, and the funny thing is that every office has
Has a
that
person
one
like that.
person. Yes.
And the thing I didn't mention before was a lot of times we think, emotions are for certain people, or emotions are for women. Emotions are biological.
Okay.
Emotions are chemicals. It's part of the way that we are wired, is the way that we are made up. So the reality is that, and you realize this because they are also intertwined with our physiology.
That's true.
That's why you feel hot when you're angry, right?
Yes.
So it means your emotions are chemicals that course through your body, and they actually have, physiological impact.
Yes.
So this person who we're talking about that causes your temperature to rise, when you know, you're able to deal with it.
Yes.
You're not taken by surprise. You're able to prepare. If it means you do a few woosas as you see them coming.
Or take a walk.
Whatever it is.
Yes.
Right? So that's how EQ helps in the workplace. It helps us to have better relationships. It helps us to be more effective in the work that we're doing, which is why you find individuals who are high in emotional intelligence are more successful.
Find your ones. Yes.
Another thing, research done by 6 Seconds finds that there are 4 key outcomes. I've mentioned 2 already. Individuals who are high in emotional intelligence are more effective. So they get stuff done.
Yes.
They have better relationships. And then the other 2, which are interesting, is they have better quality of life and better well-being. So being high in EQ helps you in terms of your health, less stress.
Really?
Yes. It helps you in terms of your health. Because again, when we are able to manage our emotions, they don't manage us, right? You all know that individual who comes into the office and you just kind of watch to see, and if they just walk past everyone and they don't talk to you, you just know that, hey, today...
That gets me off because it makes everybody else uncomfortable because then we are walking on eggshells. We're not sure whether today is a good day or a bad day.
Yes. So that that's how emotions impact the workplace.
Okay.
And what's interesting is emotions are contagious. Did you know that?
Is it this the part where you talk about energy? Is emotions energy, the way like you catch someone's vibe?
You do.
Okay.
The way we are wired for connection. That's
Okay.
just the way we are built. We are wired for connection. So what happens is, and research shows that we have what we call mirror neurons. So we tend to want to mirror, the feelings we have. That's why you can have someone come into a room and immediately everyone's energy just drops, right?
Yes.
So we pick up on and we can feed off.
Okay.
Now, what's great is the more aware I become, the more I can ensure that I don't allow that to happen. So you come in with your bad mood, hey, chick, you keep it to yourself.
I choose
I'm
me.
not taking it. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm being intentional.
Okay.
I choose myself rather than just unconsciously feeding off on your bad state. Let's
Okay.
call it that.
Let me tell you, we're just getting started. I wanted you to first understand what EQ is, because I feel we don't talk about it enough, just to understand where we are at emotionally, how that impacts you. You've talked about work. And there's something I asked you off air. Does sex matter, man or woman, when it comes to EQ? You sort of highlighted it, but
Yeah.
maybe just give people the details.
So, no, it doesn't.
Okay.
We like to refer to women as emotional. And I think what I want to start by saying is that emotional intelligence is not about being emotional or not emotional. It's about being able to process your emotions appropriately, make up decisions, right? So, there's no research that says necessarily that, one gender is more emotionally intelligent than the other. Emotional intelligence, and if I go back to the 6 seconds model I talked about earlier, so the 6 seconds model has 3 parts to it. Know yourself, which is about self-awareness.
Yes.
Choose yourself, which is about self-management. And give yourself, which is really about giving yourself a reason why.
Okay.
In each of these elements, we have what we call competencies. So if, for example, you came and said to me, Mucha, I want to see what my EQ is like.
Yes.
We would do an assessment, and that assessment comes up with the different competencies, right? And what you'll find is that there are some competencies that women favor and some competencies that men favor.
Okay.
So that's where the male-female, that's where background may come into play.
Okay.
Right? And influence someone's ability to be emotionally intelligent.
Okay.
So more specifically, there's under the know yourself element, one of the competencies is enhance emotional literacy.
Okay.
So emotional literacy is about being able to name what you are feeling.
Something
You ask
we are
your
not
child,
taught.
how
Yes.
was school? Good. What does good mean?
Okay.
And we are very good at blanketing a lot of emotions under 1 or 2, 3 words, right? Through 1 or 2, 3 words that can mean, good can mean a million things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you might find that under that enhancing emotional literacy, someone who was brought up in a home where they are regularly asked to talk about how they feel is going to be, score higher, is going to be stronger, is the word I'm looking for. I don't like
That's
to think of
true.
it as a score, because it's not like it's an exam that you're passing. It's about improving the
Okay.
different elements, right?
Yes.
So you might find that someone who grew up in a home where they are regularly asked to interrogate how they feel and express it is good at naming feelings,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But you find that there are other competencies that they may not be so strong on. Yes. So
Okay.
it's a number of competencies, and across those competencies, the idea is to identify which are your competencies that you're strong, and how can you leverage on your strengths to help you improve the ones that you're not so great at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you talk about naming emotions, it's basically saying I am angry. If someone asks you how are you, you say I am angry.
Yeah. So it's and it doesn't have to be necessarily as you speak to somebody else.
Okay.
It can be admitting it. It's to you. The person that needs to know it is you.
Okay.
Emotions are data. There's no good or bad emotion, actually. It's
Okay.
information. So the idea is for me to become more emotionally intelligent, for me to know myself, I need to get into the habit of listening to and decoding that data.
I get you.
So
Okay.
really, it's not so much about being able to tell other people you're angry. It's about you knowing that you are angry.
I get
It's about you understanding that in my anger, I am likely to act in certain ways. So how do I circumvent that, right? And then the thing about emotions is emotions come in layers often when we are having a heated exchange, you will focus and pick up on the anger first. But that anger usually has underlying emotions with it.
Okay.
Because anger can be triggered by a lot of things. Anger can be triggered because you were embarrassed. Anger could be triggered because you were disappointed. So what's key is getting into the habit of drilling down. What do I really feel? Why do I feel that way? The more we can learn to pick up how we feel, know what our triggers are, the better equipped you are to deal with situations when they happen.
Okay.
Very many of us operate on autopilot.
Please explain that. You explained to me off air, and I thought it makes so much sense. What does that mean?
We're not plugged in to the way we feel. We're just operating. It's like, if you think about it, right? I always use this example. When you're learning to drive, the driving instructor is teaching you that there are 4 things you need to do at the same time, right? So you need to be mindful of the steering.
Yes.
And when you're learning to drive, they tell you 10 and 2.
Yeah.
You need to be mindful of the mirrors, right? So there's the mirror in front of you. What do you call that? The rear view mirror, and then the side mirrors. Then there's the gears.
Yes.
Right? And then there's the pedals. So you need to do all those 4 things. When you're learning to drive, it's really hard.
It's really hard.
I learned to drive very, very, very many years ago, but I still remember changing gears. When the instructor tells you it's time to change the gear, you feel like saying, oh, can I not just go in second gear all the way?
Yes.
Right? When you're driving, after you've been driving for 10 years, do you think about it?
Nope.
You just change the gears, right? Autopilot. My mom always tells a story of how she was going for a meeting with her boss.
Yes.
And they decided to drive her car for whatever reason. So she had a really good relationship. They've been working together for a long time. And so she drives, and they're talking, they're catching up. She never says what they were talking about. Maybe they're preparing for the meeting, or even talking about their families. She says after 10, 15 minutes, she finds herself parked outside our gate. So she looks at her boss and she says, why didn't you tell me I was going in the wrong direction? And he says, oh no, I thought maybe you needed to pick up something at home before you went for the meeting.
Yes.
She'd driven the whole way home without thinking about it. Autopilot. That's what we do with our emotions.
Okay.
We just move. Now the challenge with autopilot is that things catch you off guard. So an incident happens, and because you weren't prepared for it, you tend to fumble, and whereas it's like rugby. Let me use another analogy. I like sports. So in a rugby match, if someone who's a defender is watching and sees the forward coming, and then they brace themselves and they collide, the forward is going to fall more likely than the defender.
That's true.
Why? Because you were ready for it.
This one was ready.
Yes. When the forward comes and, maybe he intercepted the ball, the defender didn't see him, so you're catching him just as he's coming and you collide, the defender's going to fall. Why? Because he wasn't ready.
Okay.
So we need to come out of autopilot. We need to be ready with our emotions. We need to have our antenna up and tune in and just know yourself that, okay, this is how I tend to behave.
Okay.
And when you do that, it becomes easier to choose yourself. So which is why knowing yourself is essential. You can't know yourself. You can't choose yourself, if you don't know yourself.
I get you.
You really have to. And it's about digging deep. And it's not something we do naturally. I think, as Africans, for example.
Especially in Africa, where you don't talk about how you feel.
We don't talk about feelings.
Yeah.
Who grew up in a home where your parents asked you how you felt? It's irrelevant. Like, seriously, it's irrelevant. How you feel is irrelevant. Right?
They ask you, how was school? Good. Do your homework.
Do you know what I mean? It was like, feelings have got nothing to do with it. And yet research is showing that they have everything to do with it.
Okay.
They are biological. It's chemicals that are, coursing through your body.
Okay, which leads me to the question. We have different personality types.
Yes.
So I was giving you an example that there are people who are loud or outspoken. They're out there. They're able to say, Mucha, there's something you did that did not make me happy. I don't talk about it right now, but at least you know how I feel. Then there are people who sit quietly. You don't know whether they're angry, whether they're happy. Again, autopilot, face. You never know how they're feeling.
Yeah.
Does personality have an impact on how high or low your EQ is?
So again, the answer I would give to that is that personality, just like background, just like upbringing and gender, can have impact on the different competencies. So maybe let me tell you what the competencies are. So there's emotional literacy. So enhancing your emotional literacy, being more aware of what that word is, naming the emotion.
Okay.
There is recognizing patterns. So recognizing patterns is about being able to see that, wait a minute, I've been here before. And the last time I was here, things didn't work out so well.
Yes.
So let me stop.
Okay.
recognizing patterns. Then there is what we call consequential thinking, applying consequential thinking, being able to weigh up the pros and cons
Okay.
of something. We have navigating emotions. So understanding that, okay, I've picked up on this is the emotion I'm in. How do I move from here to the emotion I want?
Okay.
So navigating emotion. There is optimism. That's another competency.
I like that space of
Yes,
optimism.
There is optimism.
Yes.
There is empathy. So increasing empathy. Empathy is definitely one of those key elements of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So basically, those are some of the competencies. So what will happen is someone may have a strength in a particular competency because of their personality, because of their gender, because of their upbringing.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that because you are a certain personality, a certain gender, a certain background, you are more emotionally intelligent. It just
get
means
you.
that in those competencies.
Yeah.
But then you'll find that equally, someone who is an extreme extrovert may actually not be so strong in other competencies that an introvert is stronger in.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, it does. So the difference is an introvert might be strong in certain competencies, but
Yes.
the extrovert is not.
Yes.
So if you're more
exactly.
empathetic, you might
Yes.
be missing in emotional literacy. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
So what you may find is that there may be a tendency to be stronger in certain competencies depending on your personality, but you'll find that there are other competencies that are maybe not so favorable to the person who is the
loud one.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does this look like at home? And you've already touched on it, that in most homes, there was no, I like how you say you are asked about homework. In some homes, dad enters, you go to sleep. There's no discussion.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what does this look like in a home setup?
I think that when I look at this the whole emotional intelligence thing, to be honest with you, when I came across it, for me it was extremely exciting.
Yes.
And it was extremely exciting because, like I said, research shows that EQ is indicative of success. People who are high in emotional intelligence are more likely to be successful,
Okay.
right? So for me, I'm thinking, okay, so this is something I'm learning in my over 40s.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can I help my children to learn it now, which will equip them as they go?
Yes.
So, I always say my kids are guinea pigs, where I'm trying to figure out how can I help them to develop greater emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence in the home is great because it means that, again, we are not governed by feeling. We are governed by, what do I really want? What is my intention? What is my noble goal? What outcome do I want?
Okay.
A few years ago, about 2 years ago, my son told me I shout too much. Mommy, you shout a lot. Shucks. You're like, okay. And in that moment, I was tempted to defend myself. No,
Yes.
the reason why I shout is because you guys don't listen. I have 2 boys. Right?
Okay, yes.
And, okay. So
I'm sure
I wanted to
mothers can
say,
relate.
yes, I wanted to say, the reason why I shout is because you don't listen. When I say something, I have to raise my... But in that moment, I stopped and thought, okay, it's good to get feedback, right? People who are high in emotional intelligence value feedback from others,
Okay.
even if it's your son.
Yes.
Right?
Even
So,
when they're pushing
I'm
the
like,
boundaries.
Okay. Yeah. And in growing up, I think we have a bit of an age gap, but anyway, growing up, there was never those things of feedback to your parents.
Mucha, trust me, no feedback in my house.
So
Yeah.
emotional intelligence in the home means that I'm open to feedback even from my children because I'm focused on what is the ultimate goal. Remember, we said the model is know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself. Be intentional. What is it that I ultimately want?
Okay.
When I look at my boys and I fast forward to the future, I'm seeing us hanging out when they're grown-ups.
Yes.
Right? I'm seeing us having a close relationship where, we can connect about any and everything. And I think even as we navigate through the coming teenage years, I'm praying that, what we're doing now will help us navigate that. So emotional intelligence in the home is about being focused on what do you really want.
Okay.
And understanding that just because I feel like doing something doesn't mean I must do it. And equally, it's trying to help your children learn that. Now, it's a bit harder for kids because, they tend to, when you have emotional breakdown, you have it in that moment.
Yes.
My 5-year-old is a bit of a drama queen.
Okay.
Did I say that on live TV?
Did you say that on live
Oops.
TV?
Okay.
Yes.
He's not watching, and maybe we'll edit that before he ever sees that.
Okay.
Actually, to be fair, both of my boys are drama queens. And, everyone tells me they get it from me. So, I can't
Are you a
really
drama
complain.
queen?
I am a little, yes.
Okay.
But, with the help of EQ, I'm trying to correlate.
Okay.
So with children, the reality is in the moment it's hard for them to stop and think.
Okay.
But there's little things that you can do to help them do that. There's games you can play. One of the games I really like that's awesome for kids is to have them envision a river and a bank, right? And tell them that the river, is where the waves are overwhelming and the emotions are overwhelming. And the bank is where it's nice and calm, it's peaceful. It can be, you can even make it like the seaside, where they can play and build sandcastles. So in their mind, help them to understand that when the emotions are overwhelming them, they're in the river. How do they get to the bank?
Okay.
What can I do to get to the bank? Do I need to sit down and just take a break? Is it that I need to say certain things? Do I need to just tell mommy I need a hug? What will help you to move from the river where things are swirly and I don't know how to handle to the bank?
Okay.
So it's little ways that we can help each other on both sides. Because the reality is that we both need to learn this EQ. It's not just the children, but the parents as well. But what happens is, as a parent, if you demonstrate an ability to manage your emotions, you find that your children, because children learn from what they see. So in a home where parents tend to just fly off the handle, they don't control themselves. And children are more likely to pick up on that and behave accordingly.
That's true.
Whereas in a home where a child can actually physically see you, there's power in a child physically, like they physically see that, mom was about to explode, right? But somehow,
she's kept it together.
She's kept it together.
Yeah.
It's helpful for them to learn that, maybe there's value in being able to keep it together.
Okay.
So I think that what EQ does in the home is it helps us to have stronger relationships. Remember we said outcomes of EQ are effectiveness. So we're more effective as a family, better relationships. We have better relationships with our kids where we develop this emotional intelligence muscle, the ability to be aware of how we feel, to be able to articulate it, to be able to manage it, and to be able to navigate through it. Okay. If we can do that in the home, we have homes where there's less conflict. We have homes where people feel safer. Right now it's really important for children to feel safe. And what you'll find is children who are in a home where they feel safe actually do better. That's everywhere. True. They do better in school. They have more healthy relationships because they have that comfort of safety in the home. Okay. Now, emotional intelligence doesn't mean you're a robot.
Yes.
It does not.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you're a robot. It doesn't mean you don't feel. We said emotions are data. So you feel. Yes. It just means that you try and think about and respond rather than react. So rather than just...
Okay. Yeah. How do I get to a point where I have low EQ? I want to get to a point where I have high EQ. Practically, how do I do it?
So I really thought about this because I thought I want to come and give some practical tips. So I want to share 3 practical tips. Emotional intelligence starts with knowing yourself. It starts with really being able to interrogate how you feel. And I think for me, that's tip number 1, understanding that emotions are data. And so you need to get into the habit of listening out for that data and, understanding what it means. And we can do this in a number of ways. You may find that for you, it's easier to, at the end of your day, just take stock. How was my day? What were the highs and lows as far as my emotions were concerned? Okay. The reality is that if we don't deal with our emotions, if we're not able to name them, what happens is they build up and they begin to control us. Okay. This is why you find someone who you step on their toe and they blow up. They've not really blown up because you stepped on their toe. What happened is there was a buildup of all this emotional baggage that was never dealt with. The way our bodies, our systems are wired is that this data comes and we must deal with this data. So whether it's asking yourself the why, trying to interrogate what is it that caused you to feel that way, can you change the thing that's causing you to feel that way? If you can't change it, how can you learn to deal with it, to live with it? So I think it's the first tip I would give is let's get into the habit of stopping to think about how we feel.
I get you.
Let's get into the habit of coming off autopilot. And, it may sound like it's something really silly and it may sound like it's something really basic, but it actually is where we begin to truly understand ourselves. Yes.
Can I do this in the moment?
Yeah, you can, definitely.
So I don't have to wait.
You don't have to wait until the end of the day.
Okay.
You could even tell yourself throughout the course of the day that you're going to stop and just reflect, right? And the idea is to notice your emotion. It's like you're drawing a graph of your emotional highs and lows so that you can start trying to see if there's a pattern. You know, you may find some people, it's literally when they are hungry, they spike. But they've never actually stopped to think about the fact that hunger is what causes my spike.
Okay.
All they know is when John walks into the room, I'm annoyed. But it's actually not John. It's your lack of hunger. May sound like
Maybe
a
he
silly
walks in at
example.
11.
Exactly, because he walks in at lunchtime, right? So you think it's John, but it's because you're hungry.
Okay.
So the idea is invest in knowing yourself.
Okay.
When you invest in knowing yourself, it will help you now to choose yourself. So that's the first thing. So understand that emotions are data. How can I stop to just think through? I know people who arrive home and take 5 minutes in the car.
Switch
Before
off
you
the
even
car.
go in.
Okay.
Before you go in, just take 5 minutes and just think through how was my day, right? And like I said, these things may sound like very wishy-washy kind of things, but they are helpful. So plug in, tune in, listen keenly to the data.
Okay.
And as you listen to the data, understand that it comes in layers, right? So don't just pick up on the overriding. Ask yourself deeper questions. Why did I feel that way? Why was I angry? And be honest with yourself, right? A lot of times we are not honest with ourselves. You were angry because you were embarrassed.
Okay.
So let's deal with that. So that's the first tip. Invest in getting to know yourself. Check in with yourself regularly. The second thing is understand that emotions are contagious.
That thing.
Understand that emotions are contagious. So make sure that you are not being an absorber, absorbing other people's emotions.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Absorbing other people where they are. So understand that emotions are contagious and get into the habit of, keeping your antenna out and in being intentional about not just being an absorber. Then what's interesting about emotions being contagious is you can be a transmitter, right?
Where now
you can actually, it's like you focus. It's almost like you're beaming your positive energy.
Yeah.
But you can be a transmitter. You can be the kind of individual who is very positive and transmits emotions that are positive, that helps people to kind of get up and get going. So number two, I would say, be mindful of the fact that that emotions are contagious.
Yes.
The third thing I would say that is a way to practice greater emotional intelligence. And remember, you asked me for practical things.
Practically, yes.
So the third thing that you can do is understand that we are wired for empathy. So the way, again, we are wired is we are actually wired for empathy. So be intentional about being empathetic. So what does empathy mean? So empathy means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And empathy gets a really bad rap. A lot of times people think if you're empathetic, it means people walk all over you, but that's not what empathy is. As a matter of fact, it takes more strength to be empathetic.
That's true.
It really does, because it means I'm intentionally removing my context from my brain and trying to understand your context. Because everything in life, we approach it, we disseminate it, we understand it based on our context, based on the way that I was brought up, based on my background, based on my experiences. So what that means is, if I'm empathetic, I'm mindful of other people's context. It doesn't mean I will agree with them. It doesn't mean I will do what they want. It means I've taken time to understand their concept, to understand their context, or to try and understand their context.
What I'm understanding is, even what God teaches through his word is a lot of EQ. When he says, do unto others as you, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. So be empathetic. How do we do that? Practically. So imagine that you are in a cafeteria. You're with a friend and you are serving lunch. Lunch is being served. Your lunch is put on your tray. And as you're walking to your table, your friend stumbles, knocks your tray, and you end up with the food all over your clothes. Now,
goodness me, yes.
Maybe high embarrassment, high annoyance. But as you look at your friend, what's your underlying feeling? What do you think?
So for me, I'd be angry about the food. First of all, I'm thinking I'm probably so angry. Probably wearing my best outfit and I have a TV show at 7. Yeah, so that's what would be running through my mind. Yeah.
As you're angry, though, are you going to assume your friend did it intentionally or that it was an accident?
It was an accident.
Right?
Yeah.
So immediately you're angry, but your immediate thought was it was not on purpose. Why? Why is your immediate thought that it was not on purpose?
Because she's a friend. I don't think she'd intentionally walk and, just
Exactly.
flip my yeah.
Now, let's change the scenario. This individual that you have this hate relationship with, right? You do not see eye to eye. They're the kind of person that causes your temperature to rise. This individual, that person.
Yeah.
Same scenario. They trip and the food falls on you. So you're still angry, right? That's the emotion, and that's natural, biological. Your initial reaction is what?
How dare they?
Right? Your initial reaction is that this person has intentionally decided they are going to destroy my show. They are going to mess my... Is that not right?
Yeah.
So what's different?
The relationship that I have with the person.
The relationship.
Okay.
Empathy is about assuming a relationship. It's about saying, I'm going to focus on the relationship. I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
I'm not going to assume that automatically they have it in for me. They are trying to sabotage. No. And at the end of the day, they might be having it in for you. They might be trying to sabotage you, but that's not the point.
Okay.
Empathy is about putting yourself in someone's shoes. It's about stopping and thinking that maybe it was not intentional.
Okay.
It's about thinking this person has just as much right to be heard as I do. This person has just as much right to be respected as I do. This person could actually be right. And when we do that in our minds, it changes the way we react to people. The same way that you wouldn't necessarily turn around and start shouting at your friend because you automatically, you're angry, but automatically you tell yourself, you even say sorry to your friend.
Yeah, you don't
I'm
think
so sorry. Did you fall?
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
It's that kind of thing.
Okay.
So practice being empathetic. Practice putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Practice looking at them and thinking it's not on purpose. Practice looking at them and thinking they have every right to be heard. They have every right to be respected. They could be right. Because at the end of the day, considering their context, they may be right.
Okay.
Maybe
Maybe
that your
pushed.
context
Yes.
is different.
Okay, let me sample
making
some
sense?
feedback.
Yes.
It's making a lot of sense. So this is on 22316, which you can continue texting. Hi, Njeri. You're saying, hey, Njeri here. Lovely discussion. How does one stifle the emotion when it arises? And maybe give an example on how to experience and ride the wave of emotion without necessarily bottling it. Yeah, so I think it's the analogy, river to bank. How do we get there?
Okay, so what happens is in our brain is that there's a way that emotions, feelings, actions are processed. So an external stimulus comes through to the brain and comes through our 5 senses. So I see something, I hear something, I taste something, right? And it's received by a part of the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus acts as an air traffic controller. So its job is to direct this impulse, let's call it. So the impulse is received, the thalamus receives this impulse, and under normal circumstances, what the thalamus does is it will send it to the cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain.
Yeah.
And the idea is the cortex processes, right? The cortex thinks, aha, I see a family member. What does that mean? Seeing a family member evokes feelings of love and affection.
Yeah.
So that means I'm happy. So what happens then is the cortex then passes this impulse to what we call the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain.
Okay.
And then the amygdala then makes sure that peptides and hormones are released that bring about that feeling and action. So I may be leaning to hug this individual, right? And that all happens in seconds. Now, what happens is that in a state where the brain feels under threat, perceived threat. So again, the thalamus receives this impulse, external impulse, and feels that, wait a minute, we are under threat here. What happens is that the thalamus bypasses the cortex because there's no time to think about it.
Okay.
So some years ago, there were lions escaping from
taking
from the
a
park,
stroll.
right? Taking a stroll. So there you are, you're walking along and you meet a lion. So in that moment, the impulse comes in, the thalamus receives it, and the thalamus thinks, wait a minute, this is threat. So it bypasses the thinking part of the brain. There's no time to think about it. ooh, what do you do when you meet a lion? Let me go on Google and check. Eh? There's no time for that.
Yeah.
So the thalamus bypasses the thinking part of the brain and goes straight to the emotional part of the brain, because the emotional part of the brain is the one that gears the action. And so you act, you run. So you act without thinking.
Okay.
This is why you find instances where people scale a wall. And later when you tell them they jumped up this wall, they're like, no way.
That happens.
Without thinking.
Okay.
And it is a survival mechanism. The challenge is that it is perceived threat. So sometimes the thalamus perceives that it is a life and death situation, but it's not. And so what happens is the thalamus bypasses the thinking part of the brain, moves to the emotional part of the brain, which then just acts.
Okay.
And it acts because it's not been allowed, because there's been that step of thinking missed, it acts on the basis of what's happened in the past. So it's, you know, it's almost like what do you call it? A DVD player.
Yeah.
So it almost like it feels like, okay, we need to act. So it just picks a DVD and slots in the one that has been played. And the brain is lazy. So it wants to go for the most frequently played DVD.
I get you.
And so you act. So coming to the question that was asked, research done by 6 Seconds, this organization I told you I'm part of, shows that it takes about 6 seconds for the thinking part of the brain to catch up with the emotional part of the brain.
Okay.
So usually in those moments of intense reaction, if we just wait, if you just pause, you find that the rational part of the brain catches up and you start processing.
As opposed to reacting.
As opposed to just, reacting. And if you think about it, that's why you're taught to count to 10. There's been many times, I'm sure if you cast your mind back, there's been many times where you've almost said something, you stop yourself, and then the moment passes and you just think, oh.
Okay. Yeah.
Those of us who are married have very many such instances, right?
Sorry, I need to ask another question before they tell me we are out
Yes.
of time. Anne from Thika, how are you? Anne, thank you so much for tuning in. You're saying, what if my trigger is my colleague who hurt me? I'm very sure very many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Where you constantly have to see this person who's the trigger. What do you do?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the reality about emotional intelligence and the reality about the fact that we work in organizations, we work with other people, is that being emotional intelligent is not the absence of the triggers. It is being aware that
Yes.
this is the trigger, and then finding ways that you can have an outlet of some sort. So you may not be able to remove this thorn in your
The
flesh,
trigger, yeah.
right? But you can figure out, how do I navigate? So could that be minimizing the amount of times that you are, in direct conversation?
Okay.
It could be making sure that you have an outlet where all of that stress that's associated with this individual is then at least dumped elsewhere.
Okay.
So that when you come in, you're coming in on a clean slate.
Yeah.
I find that in life, somehow being prepared for something makes it so much easier to deal with it.
Okay.
Often what derails us, where we end up in a state of emotional hijack, is because we are ill prepared. So there's no magic wand. You can't magic away feelings. But what happens is, remember we said that the brain is very, maybe lazy is not the right word, it's very efficient. So it wants to do what it does normally, what it does, by default. So I think it's creating new pathways by responding differently to this individual.
Yeah.
And thinking to yourself that you can't allow someone else to impact the way that you feel. It's about deciding that I'm not going to be an emotional absorber. I'm going to find ways that I can, almost like, build a force field.
Yeah.
And some of those ways can be really silly ways.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining for this individual, you said, what's the name?
Anne from Thika.
Anne from Thika. I'm just imagining that in your mind, you imagine a force field.
Yes.
And you imagine it in your head. You even picture it. You could even draw it out somewhere. Tell yourself it's a pink force field and it has glitter on it, whatever. And every time this individual throws a barb at you, it's just bouncing on the force field.
You
actually even start laughing.
Yeah.
So even when you see them, you actually smile because
Yeah.
you're thinking, you're never
And
going to
that
get through the
throws
force
them
field.
off. Yes.
And what that does is it shifts you from being this person who is, I don't know, a person who is a slave to the behavior of another,
Yeah.
to a person who's prepared for it.
I'm being wrapped up, Mucha. So I'll get very quickly to the last thing.
Seriously? Oh,
One,
wow.
can you share your contacts? I think I
Yes,
can share your
yes,
email.
yes,
I have
yes,
permission.
yes, you can.
And very lastly, someone is saying, I love this talk. Is there training? 30 seconds. 20.
So we have EQ cafes every
Okay.
quarter, and actually the next one is next week on Thursday.
Okay.
So EQ Cafe, if you want to find more details, go on our social media pages, PTS Africa, so Papa Tango Sierra Africa. Everywhere. So on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we are there. My social media pages are Mucha Mlingo. So MUCHAMLINGO. Again, across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And you'll find information about the EQ Cafe. EQ Cafe is just a fun way to come and learn about emotional intelligence.
And we have to go because they're telling me they're going to cut me off.